Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question which I will flip in here. And he asked me, what do you think about blood flow restriction training, also known as occlusion training? So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this. Alright, this isn't a new topic. I have covered this in the past, but it's always important to keep these things in perspective with fresh material, because a lot of this stuff gets pushed out there on YouTube. And even though I may have talked about this in the past, other people are going to ask because they'll see another YouTuber doing it. There's a new YouTuber doing this sort of training every single week up there. And let's talk about it because it's important, with it being popularized by certain people, that we give the other side of the story. Alright, when it comes to studies and stuff, there have been studies done on it that showed promise, but I do have some problems with the studies, and the reason I do is setting aside the risk, that's another topic entirely, has to do with the fact that there seems to be, from what I can tell, no measurable benefit from doing this. Now, some people are going to be like, but what about the studies? I am talking about the studies. And this is coming from someone who is open to new things. You know how you guys know when I first started my channels, I talked about, heavier lifting and even certain rep ranges really being ideal for muscle growth, and going too high wasn't great. I didn't like these things, and you know what? It's because I am biased as someone with a strength training background. I am biased as someone who believes in lifting heavy weights. However, a number of studies came out which showed absolutely positive anabolic benefits, growth, size gains from doing ultra high reps. And what do I mean by ultra high reps? Going over 20. When you're going over 20 or 25 reps, we're getting to ultra high. You know what? As far as metabolites in the blood, all the signs of muscle growth, all those studies showed that doing 25 and 30 rep sets, sometimes even 40 rep sets, particularly when you take them to failure. You guys got to remember, failure with high reps is not caused by the same systems in the body that failure with low reps is caused by. So keep that in mind, that they gained just as much muscle mass as people doing like 8 to 10 reps. Just as much. They're just as beneficial for size. Now, as someone with a strength background who believes in strength and power, I don't like that. But you know what? I accepted it. I'm about to sneeze here. So you guys know this stuff is uncut, and I do these raw. But yeah, I don't like it, but you know what? I accepted it and said, okay, I can hate it all I want, but the data's looking pretty good. You can get big doing 25 reps, okay. You guys notice you see me doing 25 rep dips and things? Notice my chest and triceps got bigger. Guys are asking, what'd you do for your triceps? I quit isolating them. The only fluff I do for my triceps is 20 and 25 and sometimes occasionally 30 rep dips or weighted dips, but I have days where I come in and do 25 or 30 reps on the dips. My triceps grew. So instead of rejecting the data, I embraced it. You know what? I embraced some of it. Said, okay, it seems to be true. The problem is that with this occlusion training, they don't have control groups. They're doing a bunch of high reps with the occlusion training, ultra high reps, and saying, aha, look at all those blood markers. But just a year before, we had studies coming out showing the exact same thing from doing the high reps without the bands. Where's your controls? There's no controls in place. They're simply strapping tourniquets on themselves and comparing them to lower reps and saying, aha, see, we're seeing just as good, if not better, blood metabolites in people doing 8 or 10 or 12 reps are on these bicep curls. But they did the same thing with the high reps without tourniquets in other studies previously and showed the same thing. Where's the benefit? I'm not seeing where the benefit is to the blood flow restriction. Because doing ultra high reps with tourniquets on produces similar metabolites in the blood that doing ultra high reps without tourniquets on does in different studies. But the thing is, because the people who are doing this are trying to promote blood flow restriction, the little minor studies done on it are attempting to promote it, they didn't put the variables in place for a true apples to apples comparison. And that's what, when we talk about studies not being perfect and sometimes being flawed, the data, when you compare the data cross-study, I'm not seeing where the benefits are. because they didn't put a proper control in to compare it to. Do the exact same reps with the lightweight without the tourniquets and compare those to with the tourniquets. I want to see some benefit there. And I think the authors of these studies, because they're trying to reinvent the wheel, they're trying to make names for themselves, coming out with something new, something that can be hyped, something that's, again, a totally unproven system, just a new way to train that adds an extra complexity to, again, reinvent the wheel. They want to go away from the basics, but they don't want to do an apples to apples comparison. And I think the reasons are they're scared that without the tourniquets, people are going to make better gains. Meaning if they take the same ultra high rep training they're doing with the blood flow restriction, and they have people run it for 6 months and do muscle biopsies and DEXA scans, I think the guys without the tourniquets might end up getting better. And I think the authors of the studies are worried about that too. But until you do that and compare the two, you still do not have evidence of blood flow restriction working. Now, you've got that to deal with, and you have the other issue with it. Blood flow restriction is, again, causing blood flow restriction. I can't advocate that. I don't see this as a good thing. This is always going to carry a risk with it. People will say, well, it's a small risk, all training has risk, everything has risk, and you're right. But why add an additional risk that has an unproven benefit? That may actually turn out that it impedes your progress. It might turn out, because again, it hasn't been studied, for all you know, you could gain less muscle from using the tourniquets. You could gain less muscle from using the tourniquets with the same weight and reps, because maybe it turns out that when you're doing those ultra high reps with those 10-pound dumbbells, that you would actually get more reps and more workload and more metabolites if you pulled the stupid ass tourniquets off. So why take the risk of doing it? Why add an extra complexity of your training? You're having to buy tourniquets. People say, well, that's cheap. I mean, look at just how much my diet is alone. Okay, that's fair. But if they're not giving you any benefits, you're having to buy some piece of shit to wrap around yourself. You're adding extra complexity to your training and extra gym time by having to tie these things. Sometimes it requires someone to help you. Again, adding extra complexity and work to your training that may not have a benefit, that may have an additional risk to it, because again, you're tying tourniquets on yourself. It's fucking stupid. And everyone wants to reinvent the wheel. Everyone wants to move away from the basics with something new. The basics work for a reason, because they're time proven. We know they work. And again, this is stuff with just people who don't understand that the reason they're not getting the gains they want is because either they're not training correctly with the basics, or because they're comparing themselves to people who use more drugs than they do, or maybe are more genetically gifted than they are. There's that factor as well. That is always a factor, and no one wants to admit that. And by more drugs than you, your number could be 0. That means you're natural. So anyone on any drugs is using more drugs than you. But people don't want to come to terms with that fact, and they want to reinvent the wheel instead of just focusing on the basics. If your biceps aren't growing, it's probably not tourniquets that you need. You probably need to get stronger on your weighted chin-ups and get stronger on your basic barbell curl, or your incline dumbbell curl, one of those really efficient movements that really works the biceps effectively. All right, that's probably your problem. You just need to get stronger on those exercises. Maybe you need to add more size overall. It's really hard sometimes to make a really small muscle grow when nothing else is growing in your body. Oftentimes your body will grow in proportion. Once you just get bigger and stronger overall and put a little more focus on your weighted chin-ups and your curls, problem solved. Your biceps will probably start growing again. But no one wants to just do the basics because they think that they're a special snowflake that needs something special besides the basics. And the reality is you guys aren't. It doesn't matter if your mommy said that you were a special snowflake and unique. You really aren't. At least not in terms of biomechanics and your muscles and everything, unless you're being diagnosed with some sort of degenerative condition or something, or some sort of defect or mutation in your muscles. You're not unique. You're not special. The basics will work for you. And on a side note, people always throw in when they talk about this, well, for deload training. Again, people don't seem to understand the purpose of deload training. If you need to deload, it's probably because you overreached. You have chronically overreached to a point to where you can no longer recover from the workloads and volumes that you did. But that also means once you do recover, you're going to have a tremendous adaptation. You don't need anything special. You don't need to wrap tourniquets around your arms to continue to stimulate new muscle growth with the ultra lightweight of your deloads. Just come in and do your deloads. The previous workloads and stimulation that you did is going to cause you to grow during your deloads, not tourniquets. Again, when you understand how a deload works and you understand that you're not trying to stimulate new growth of the deload, you're just coming back in and just re-stimulating blood flow, motor pathways, and muscle protein synthesis. You're adapting to your previous overreaching and hard work on a deload. And if you had trained hard enough going into a deload, just coming in and doing your little lightweight, not even close to failure, not putting in any hard work, just keeping your blood flowing and working on the movement patterns will allow you to grow from all that other hard work that you previously did once it plays catch up. You don't need tourniquets for that. People grow just fine on deloads without using occlusion training. It just isn't necessary. And again, it shows that people don't understand how deloads work or what's really going on there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.